Welcome and a good evening to everyone here and at home watching via YouTube. I am very honored to introduce and to welcome to the stage Vladimir Slivyak from Ecodefence, and he has been a long-time activist. He will introduce himself more, so I will not say much on that. I will just say briefly, he will start with a presentation now of around 30 minutes. The presentation will be in English. If you have any questions and are present here, you can maybe put up your hand now if you don't understand English and need any help, and we will see whether we can help with that. And afterwards, I will be asking questions for 20 to 30 minutes, and then we will open the questions up to the audience via YouTube chat, and also here in the live audience, Nicolene will be helping out with that. So Vladimir, thank you very much for coming here. We are very, very honored to have you here. We came in contact with you first time on the 31st of October when you held a speech at the rally in Lützerath, one of the threatened villages close to the Garzweiler complex, where we are fighting against coal, which you have been doing for a long time as well, but you've also been fighting against other things, which you will tell us about. Please give a warm round of applause.
Thank you. How we do with this thing? You just press when I show? Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for coming on Saturday in the evening. In Russia, it would be hard to get people in the weekends for such things, and I'm glad to see a lot of people came. My name is Vladimir Slivyak. I'm working in environmental movement for 32 years, and most of my time in the environmental movement was the work against nuclear power, and I will later tell you why. Because I know that there was also interest in the audience about the issues of whether we should use nuclear power to fight climate change or not, and why. It's all very important issues. I will touch about it later. For the last 8 years, my organization also working against coal quite intensively, and we don't really have big movement against coal in Russia, and Ecodefence, my group, is basically trying to start this movement in Russia and help local communities to fight against coal mining, like, you know, the same fight like you do in Lützerath, that kind of things. But first, a little bit about our history. This year we got Alternative Nobel Prize, which is the sort of a highest achievement in terms of prizes for activists, and we've been very happy, and we became the first environmental organization in Russia that got Alternative Nobel Prize, and that was for the, you know, the long time work we did over 30 years. We started can you have the second one? We started back in 1989. In 1989, it was still the Soviet Union. My country was called the Soviet Union by that time. And I was putting here a picture that that you feel more about what was 1989. It was the same year when the Berlin Wall fell in Germany. So this is when we started to do environmental campaigns, and first we've been very much focused on the problems that exist in our city. That was the city of Kaliningrad. That's also not very far from Germany. It's on the other coast of the Baltic Sea from here, next to Lithuania and Poland. But we wanted very much to work on energy issues because we felt like the energy is a key issue for the let's say environmental, the consequences for the environment. And our first campaign we did was massive campaign that caused the demonstration in my city of 10,000 of people, and until today, that's the largest demonstration in history of the city. That was against the facility that was bleaching paper, the pulp and paper mill, which didn't have any cleaning facilities and which was dumping dangerous chemicals right to the river without any cleaning, and that's why the river was dead and there was a lot of dead fish, and it was stinking very much through the whole city basically. And we succeeded to stop pulp and paper mill in 1990, which gave us a lot of power actually, because when we started our activity, we didn't really think that we will honestly, we didn't think we will change the world. It was the Soviet Union. It was very little hope for a change. And we started not because we thought, oh, now we will win everything and the world will become a better place. We started because we just seen the problems, and the problems been big. And we seen a lot of people suffering from those environmental problems. But at the same time, we've seen that people didn't do any action about problems. And we decided, well, if nobody else wants to do this, then we will do this. Okay. And just in 1 year after we found the environmental organization Ecodefence, we got our first big success. We succeeded to shut down pulp and paper mill that was throwing chemicals to the river. And that was empowering very much. The successes always empower people very much. Can we, one more? I brought a bunch of pictures so that you just get a better feeling how we do different actions and everything in Russia. But the first, and the most important campaign that we did in our history through the, absolutely the longest time of our history was the campaign against nuclear power. In 1986, the nuclear power plant exploded in the Soviet Union. That was called Chernobyl power plant. And a very big territory in Europe was contaminated with radiation because of it. And the total number of people who were affected by Chernobyl is approximately about 1 million of people. I mean, in different ways. Some people been resettled in a not voluntarily way. Let's say some people got sick, some people died as a result directly of this explosion. But the scientists saying it's about 1 million of people who have been suffering because of Chernobyl, because of the different consequences of Chernobyl. One of the most important campaigns that we've been doing in our history was a campaign against import of nuclear waste, because our government decided it's okay to import nuclear waste to Russia. And that is completely unpopular position, because, any public opinion poll you do in Russia, it will always show you more than 80% or more than 90% of people opposed to the import of radioactive waste to Russia. And but government unfortunately doesn't take it seriously. So we started to campaign against import of radioactive waste sometimes in 90s. And one of the biggest campaigns that we've been, we did not win it yet, but we've been on different stages of this campaign. We've been winning many times. That's about the radioactive waste coming from Germany. There is a tiny city or town that's called Gronau in northern Rhine-Westphalia, where it's uranium enrichment plant located, and they produce a lot of radioactive waste as a result of uranium enrichment. And the uranium enrichment is needed to produce nuclear fuel for the power plants. There is a big problem with radioactive waste everywhere around the world. And this problem that nobody, for the last 70 years that nuclear power industry exists, nobody ever was capable of developing technology that can safely that can make nuclear waste safe, that can solve the problem of storing waste for thousands of years. You know, once you produce nuclear waste, well, you have to find a way how you're going to store it for thousands of years. Well, you have to pay for it. You have to check safety in your storages and all of it. That's a kind of a big problem. And really, because in last century, there was a lot of nuclear power plants built, and people produced so many nuclear waste, unfortunately, that will be hundreds of future generations who would have now to spend money to keep this waste in a safe manner as much as possible and prevent leakages of radiation. So basically with nuclear power, I mean, one of the big problems with nuclear power, why we don't like it, why we campaign against it, is because you produce electricity today and you make money on it today, but then the waste of this production, you put it on the shoulders of hundreds of future generations that will not get any profit from it, but will have to spend all the time a lot of money to keep it safe. My organization been quite successful in shutting down a few nuclear power plants that was in Russia and in South Africa. Just about 6 or 7 years ago, we won a big campaign in South Africa where Russia wanted to build 8 nuclear reactors. And we've been running joint campaign between Russian and South African groups, and we won. And basically, we disrupted the plan that worth of 100 billion of American dollars. That was the price for 8 nuclear reactors and a number of different nuclear facilities around them. But campaign that we still going on with today, it's campaign against radioactive waste from Germany. And maybe, I don't know, probably you haven't heard about it in Cologne, but just on Wednesday, the city of Münster approved a resolution saying they are not welcoming transportation of radioactive waste through Münster to Russia. And we've been working on this actually many years to get them approve this resolution. They finally did after to be 9, yeah. And here you can see different pictures from protests that we did. We started campaign against the import of German radioactive waste back 2005, and can you? Yeah, there's more actions against this radioactive waste. And by 2009, in 4 years, we succeeded to stop transportations of waste from Gronau to Russia, and the head of Russian nuclear industry said at this time in 2009 that Russia will never ever again import radioactive waste from Germany. That's so-called uranium tails, the waste of uranium enrichment. But suddenly in 2019, we learned that they're doing this again, and we had to restart this campaign, and we, through 2019 and 2020, we organized a lot of different actions around country in more than 30 cities where people were coming on the street and protesting to the transportations of radioactive waste. And right now it stopped, but we suspect it could happen again next year. And if it happens, we will, of course, go to protest again, both in Russia and in Germany, with our colleagues here in Northern Rhine-Westphalia. So what about climate? Because as far as I understand, all of you are concerned about climate, and you do actions about climate, right? And there are like a huge propaganda right now around the world, in the media, everywhere, in many countries, of a nuclear industry who says, like, if you want to save climate, you might not like nuclear power, but if you have to save climate, you have to use it. You don't have a choice. Well, let's look into this, let's look into details of this. Nuclear power industry was, in the beginning, it was not for electricity production. It was for the nuclear bomb. It's later that they come up with the idea that they could produce electricity. But in the beginning, it was only a nuclear weapon and nothing else. And this is why in those states where nuclear power exists, where nuclear industry exists until today, the government's been giving unlimited financial resources to nuclear industry. And the nuclear industry never really had a problem with money. And they could build as many reactors as they wanted. They would always get the money. In Russia, it's like that until today. That our nuclear industry have unlimited access to the state budget. I mean, like the doctors in the hospitals could get very small salary, teachers in the schools getting very small salary, and really like sometimes fighting to survive with such a small money. But this is not the case with nuclear industry. They always had enough money to build reactors or to build nuclear bombs and everything like this. And for 70 years, nuclear industry had unlimited access to financial resources. They built few hundreds of nuclear reactors that's working right now around the world. But all of this together supply only 4% in primary energy if we look on the world scale, in the energy balance around the world globally. It's just 4% of energy that they produce. Most of the nuclear reactors been built like more than 30 years ago. The most of nuclear reactors that exist today. Sometimes it's 40 years, sometimes it's even more than 40 years. And in the next 10, 15 years, a very big number of reactors will be shut down. And when we're looking into capacity of a nuclear industry, the capacity to build new nuclear reactors today, you can understand that their ability is very small. And it's very unlikely that they will be able to build even this number of reactors, new reactors, that needed to replace old reactors that will be shut down. So basically, that shows us, yeah, come on in. Yeah. So basically, the real situation around the world today is that, well, the best result the nuclear industry could get in the next several decades is to maintain 4% of the world energy production in the primary energy. I mean, it's, well, almost 100%, you can be sure that it's impossible to build more than this. It's even will be hardly possible to build that number of reactors, because it's going to be dozens of reactors, even hundreds of reactors in the next couple of decades, just to maintain 4% in the balance, not going like 10% or 20 or 30% in the world energy production. So the most important question is how and if nuclear industry can actually deliver any kind of emission reduction in the real world today. I mean, on the paper, they're saying they can do everything. But when we look into technical details, it's unlikely that nuclear industry can actually produce that much energy and save that much emission that it would be in any way significant for climate. Another problem with nuclear industry when we're speaking about climate change is that building nuclear reactors is a very long process. It takes roughly 2 decades to from the planning stage to the stage where reactors start to produce electricity. And at the same time, the climate science tells us very, very clear thing, that we need to become carbon neutral by mid-century. Basically, 2050 is the date when we need to be carbon neutral if we wanted to avoid the most catastrophic consequences of climate change. So with nuclear reactor that is in terms of a planning and construction takes about 20 years, it's hardly possible actually to build a lot of nuclear reactors, and again, it's hardly possible to achieve any significant reduction of a greenhouse emission. And yet, of course, nuclear power industry is a very expensive thing. The latest report in Spiegel was telling the new French reactor cost 19 billion of euro. I mean, unbelievable, 19 billion of euro for one nuclear reactor. And I mean, when we speak, when people working on climate and nukes and opposing coal, when we speak about whether nuclear can help to save the climate or not, we would usually say, no, it cannot help us to save the climate for a reason that it's too slow. At the time of construction, the time, when you get reactor online, that's a too long time, and we need emission reduction much faster than this. It's too expensive, and reactors getting more and more expensive all the time. I remember back in 1990, one nuclear reactor with 1 gigawatt capacity, it was $1 billion of American dollars to build. Today, I mean, France is building reactor that costs 19 billion of euro, not even dollars. So the nuclear industry is too slow, too expensive, and still too dangerous. There is still nuclear waste that nobody wants to really take and store it for indefinite time. And of course, accidents can still happen. I mean, 1986 Chernobyl, 2011 Fukushima, and there was number of other accidents in Europe, in USA, when either reactors or sometimes storages of nuclear waste exploded, and a lot of people would be resettled, a lot of people would get cancer because of it. So basically, nuclear is, as we call it, a false solution for a climate problem. It won't help us. We should really think about other options, how to deal with the problem of climate change. Going for nuclear will just eat out all our money and will not deliver any kind of result in terms of emission reduction. Yeah. Some more pictures. It's actually our protest back in 2005, 2006, 2007. That is Gronau, actually, joint blockade. And this is the blockade of a German embassy in Moscow that we did back in 2006, which actually helped us very much to attract attention to the whole thing. Can you explain? Yep. Those are pictures from a campaign against nuclear reactor in Russia near Kaliningrad that we succeeded to stop. And what else there? Yeah, that's the same campaign. Can you move more and more? Again? Yeah, that's near Gronau. Again? Yeah, I'm trying to move on the coal part. Yeah. No. I was recently, just last night, I had a really hot discussion on the Facebook with a guy who was saying he used to be anti-nuclear, but because of a climate change, he changed his mind, and now he thinks we have to use nuclear. And we've been going into deep into discussion with different technical details. I was trying to prove it doesn't make sense. In the end, he said, you just don't understand how bad the coal is. If you would understand it, then you would never really be against nuclear, because, to replace coal, you need nuclear. Which is not true. Here I'm moving on a part with coal that we're doing. We're doing campaign in Russia against coal for the last 8 years. we are the only environmental organization right now that's working on a national level against coal. This picture comes from a region called Kuzbas. That's like the heart of a Russian coal industry. Up to, well, between 70 and 80% of Russian coal produced in this region, and almost all of the export to different countries, including to Germany, that's coal from Kuzbas. Yeah, is yeah, the 50% of a coal that they mine there, that's go for export, both directions, Western Europe and Southeast Asia. Yep. Yeah. We have one of the problem, another problem, let's say, we have in Russia is with our government in its policies. We don't really have any good climate policies. Our government doesn't like to reduce emission. Actually, we have a strategy that's an energy strategy that basically says that emission of greenhouse gases will grow. Right now, Russian government doesn't plan to phase out fossil fuel or even reduce the use of fossil fuel. So basically, it's just an activist, like from my organization or from Fridays for Future. We also have them in Russia. And some other groups that trying to sort of change this situation and trying to distribute information about climate and how bad fossil fuel is. And the current plan of Russian government, unfortunately, is to produce almost 50% more coal compared to what we produce today in the Kuzbas and a couple of other regions. And the total investment that Russian government is going to put is a few billions of American dollars to put for the development of a coal industry. Yeah, and a part of our work is we trying to empower local communities that living next to coal mining. We're trying to organize local people, and not only local people, we're trying to involve more environmental activists into protests against coal mining or against coal transportation. Here you can see the protest in the Far East, where a lot of people went to protest against the construction of a new coal terminal on the coast for the export of coal to China and South Korea. Here you can see quite an interesting picture. This one. It says "help" in Russian. But this is a very famous thing called black snow that's been in the media quite a lot in the past years. The sign "help", it's written on the snow in last winter. And you can see what color the snow is. What happens in Kuzbas in many places, and it happens every year in different places, it's not like once in 100 years, that when the white snow is falling down, when it reaches the ground, there is so much of a coal dust in the air close to the ground that when the snow finally reaches the ground, it becomes black. And those things are happening. And last year we published the first of a kind the research, the report that we produced that was showing how much through the last 15 years the coal production was growing up, and on parallel how much the public health was worsening in the same place, in the same region, and and that many more people, the more coal was mined, more people would get sick, basically, simply saying, with all kinds of different diseases. This is what our government doesn't like to talk about, so it's again only activists who basically there to distribute information like this. And I cannot say that people don't understand it. Well, especially people living in Kuzbas understand it pretty much. They understand very well that they having bad health because of a coal mining. They have a lot of economic problems and other problems because of a coal mining. But it's the same. It's exactly like back in 1989 when we started our organization back in the Soviet Union. It's that everybody see the problem, everybody's suffering, but nobody's doing anything because people don't believe in change. They think they cannot achieve any change. So for us, for all the 30 years or more than 30 years of our work, one of the goals was always to be creative and work on empowering people, telling them and showing them that the change is possible. And we've been doing a lot of things that nobody ever did before in Russia. Like, for example, a few years ago, for the first time in our history, we succeeded to stop a new coal mine in the Kuzbas through the court. And nobody could really believe that we actually stopped it, but it happened. And a lot of people started to call and ask us to come and help to stop other coal mines around and everything. So, I mean, unfortunately, I have to say, in terms of a coal or climate or nuclear issues, Russia is pretty much big disappointment at the moment. But what I've learned through my 30 years doing activism is that it's not hopeless. It might be very much disappointing, and things could go like really wrong in this country, but it's never hopeless, and the people never hopeless. Well, we just have to put more efforts, as much effort as possible, into changing people's minds, because in the end, this is what we all work for. We want to change people's minds. We want people to live, to start, you know, basically a different life, do things differently because of a climate change or because other problems. This is what activists doing. And can I see what is there? Yeah. Anything else? More? Yeah, just that's how one of it's not the largest mine that we have. This one, but that we have a lot of those mines in Kuzbas. That you get a feeling how it looks like. Well, I mean, a bit like in Lutzerat, but I mean, I think ours are a bit deeper. Yeah, and here is another thing that I'm actually, well, that I'm actually proud of this part of our work. When we came to work in Kuzbas, with the local people there and trying to bring them information about coal, trying to help them organize against coal industry. We've seen a lot of disappointment in people. We've seen all these usual things that people don't believe in change and everything. And it's hard to believe, but until 2005 or 2006, in this region, which was over a long period in history, it was extremely dependent on coal, and the coal is the main part of a local economy. I mean, the whole region economically depends on coal very much, and never ever in this region a single environmental protest happened. And I mean, one of the things I'm proud about when it comes to work of my organization is that we succeeded to basically change the minds of some people there. People started to protest. I mean, down there, the photo of a protest camp that happened actually after the first lockdown in 2020, when the local villagers found out that there is a new plan to open the coal mine and build some infrastructure around coal mine. And even if it was pandemic and any kind of protest was strictly prohibited, people went to protest. They established the camp at the place where the infrastructure for a coal mine was supposed to be built, and they spent there basically 2 months protesting. When such actions happening, I'm really happy that we've been doing all this work, and we actually finally succeeded to convince just, well, at least some people that it makes sense to do all of it. What else? Yeah, here's some more. That's the protest I was just telling you about. It's different pictures from this protest last year in the summer. Yeah. Yeah, here's this picture basically tells about another problem is that when coal industry in Russia start to mine coal close to some village, they would put all these huge monster cars there that moving coal 24 hours a day, and they would finally kill the roads that the people use for their needs. And that could become in some places a big problem, because it could be like one small village in only one road that linking this village to civilization. And if this road destroyed, then even emergency cannot really come to the village if somebody got sick or something. So I mean, a lot of local people now complaining about this thing as well. It is quite a lot of time that I already took. It's more than half an hour, right? It is more. Okay. I think. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah. Okay. I hope I could give you enough of interesting information to also about my country and about activism in my country. I mean, it's not that I told about everything I wanted, because I mean, usually there would be big part about repression against activists and in different problems that what's the cost of activism in Russia, which is very high. But I mean, if you're interested about it, just ask me in the next round when we do the questions, right?
Right. So we can. Thank you very much for that. That was really interesting. And actually, I think the repression is something I would like to speak about a little later. I have like 3 things I wrote down, which I would really like to know more about, which is, for one, when preparing for this and, well, using Ecosia to search for
Came up with a very bad law on the foreign agents. And the law is basically saying that you have to register as a foreign agent if you get money from foreign foundations and participate in political work. And this law violates the main principles of European Convention on Human Rights. And we went to European Court on Human Rights to prove this, and we expect until today when European Court on Human Rights will look into action of Russian government. But the law on the foreign agents basically caused most of the environmental groups that existed 7 years ago in Russia to close down, because they've been just really very much afraid about their future. And we became the first environmental organization in Russia that was forcibly included to the list of foreign agents, along with most prominent human rights groups in Russia, like Memorial and others. After we found ourselves in the list of foreign agents, we had about probably more than 30 court cases when the government was going to court against us or taking us to court for non-complying with the law on the foreign agents. They've been giving us a lot of fines in the court, and they put an organization in a big debt because we were getting a lot of fines and we couldn't pay them because we are non-profit, we are not making money. But I mean, it was, especially the last 7 years, been very hard time for Russian civil society. It's been shrinking very much because a lot of people just would prefer to close down their organization and stop their activities in order to avoid further problems with the government. In a government, well, shortly speaking, Russian government got too much annoyed with voices from the street, with the influence we're trying to put on the government. So they decided to solve this problem in a radical way. Decided to put everybody on the list of a foreign agent and basically tried in a sort of in an attempt to paralyze our activity, because when you become a foreign agent in Russia, you will many times go to court. You will be fined many times. You would need like to hire additional accountant to make papers for the government because you have this foreign agent status. And a lot of people would be suspicious about who you are if you are on the list of foreign agents. I mean, really, I mean, the foreign agent law in Russia is what actually nearly destroyed entirely civil society, basically. I mean, there are still some organizations, but you cannot really compare it to what it was 7 years or 10 years ago.
So before this law was put in place, I think it was 2014 or 13. What was activism like when you started? Because you won your very first campaign you were a part of, and I found that very impressive. 10,000 people in Germany, I don't know, it really depends on the issue whether you would win with 10,000 people going to the street. Fridays for Future has mobilized millions on the street, and well, they've made progress, but not as much as they would expect. They wouldn't exactly say that they have won yet. So how would you say, does activism work in Russia, and like how did it work? Because in Germany it's often people trying to put pressure on government and to like threaten, well, we won't elect you if you don't do what we're telling you. How did this work in Russia, and what are decision makers scared of, or how can you put pressure on them there?
Well, back 30 years ago was a wonderful time for activism because you could literally go on the street and do whatever you want. Any kind of campaign. It was actually much more easier in terms of organizing people. And that was very special time. I mean, just like in Germany when the Berlin Wall falls, it was very like a very free time. People suddenly started to feel like there is no control of a state over them anymore. And I mean, basically the environmental movement was more or less born in the second half of 80s in 20th century, when a lot of people all around the country, that's been like in every town, every city, there would be some environmental group. They would be doing, I mean, working on their own issues, and a lot of people got successful. And I mean, the end of 80s in the Soviet Union was, I mean, I think the main characteristic of this time was that the state or the government became so weak they couldn't really keep people power contained somewhere. They didn't really control situation anymore. It's been people on the street who took over, and they were doing whatever they wanted and whatever they felt is good thing to do, basically. I think the activism is the most important thing of our time. The well, probably if you go on the street and try to ask people around who they think make the change, like I don't know, most of the people would probably say the politicians, because they are taking decisions that affect all of us. Some people will say it's media, because media say something, everybody start to think this way. And but my experience tells me that it's not politicians and it's not media, it's an activist. The government and the politicians, they are technical people. They doing what we want them to do. If we're good enough, if we effective enough in our actions, then we become a people who make a change. In the government, it's just doing its, very technical role. They just, take the decisions we ask them to do. It's actually very often the same with media. It's activists who basically affecting very much the agenda in the big media. Again, if activists are effective, they can affect politicians, they can affect media. And my experience tells me that the beginning of change, how change first starts, the process of change, it's always an activist who initiated it. It's not, Kanzlerin, or it's not Bundestag, and it's not media who start the change. It's an activist who start the change. And when speaking about, like, are we getting successful in the end or not, it also depends on us. It's not so much about whether politicians or media approve what we do. It more depends on, do we have enough energy? Are we effective enough? Are we doing all we can to make a change? And if you 3 times say yes, you will get the change you want. That could be longer time or shorter time, could be different things. But in the end, if you are good enough, you will get your change, you was asking for a long time about. And I had a lot of experience like this in my life. So I'm absolutely sure that activists are actually ruling the world, not politicians.
That's a really great sentence. I'm definitely going to remember that. And if you say we really have to show the persistence and it's activists who rule the world, you've been an activist for a very long time. What would you say is the most important part of being an activist, and what is the most important thing if you want to be successful? What is, for example, in the current Fridays for Future movement in Germany, we experience a lot of debates about strategy, about tactics, whether civil disobedience should be should take a more central role in our tactics, or whether we should remain more should have lower barriers to entrance into activism. What would you say is, like, from your experience, what are the most important strategies? What is the most successful tactic you've used and you've seen and observed?
Well, during campaigns and successful campaigns, strategy, tactics, that depends pretty much on specific case. It could be very different. You can see and you see in Germany a lot of different groups using different tactics, and a lot of, in my opinion, a lot of successful groups, and the Galenda, of course, and everything. But I think for an activist, you have to be smart, you have to be creative, and you have to have enough energy. And I mean, having enough energy, it actually depends on you and on everybody personally. If you like really taking care of yourself, I mean, um, when I was like 16 years old, or 20 years old, or 25 years old, I would never think about anything like, that I have that in order to have enough energy in the future, I have to stop from time to time and take a little bit of rest or stuff like this. I mean, 20 years ago, we didn't think about anything like this. We wanted to do stuff and we were just going and doing that. And it's only when, we reach like, I don't know, 50 years old, then we start to understand, well, if we would really would be taking better care of ourselves, we would have more energy over a long period of time. And this is what I'm trying to tell a lot to when I'm speaking to young people, to the young activists quite a lot. I'm always saying like really think about, taking care of yourself, a very good care of yourself. If you want to be an activist over a long period of time, if you want to be effective, you just really have to take care of yourself. That's very important. So I would say, like, the three key things for me is like when you're creative, smart, and you have enough energy. If you have these three things, you're definitely going to change the world.
That's very brilliant. Do you have a thing that gave you energy at like did you have your thing that really gave you energy, or is it just this general motivation to keep fighting for what you were fighting for?
Well, from the very beginning, my motivation was basically um, about um, what I mean. The idea that I got in somehow when I was very young, um, I wanted to check out if it's possible for just ordinary human being from the street do something, influence big industry or government and make them actually do what you want. And I always felt like it's very important also to show to the rest of the people that it's actually possible. If you're just an activist from the street, you don't have any kind of, you don't have any huge resources. You don't have I mean, there is no big politicians behind you or somebody else. You're just a human being, and you decide to make a change. Is it possible or not? If it's possible, how it's possible? Those are the things that's been most interesting for me in my life. And I was always trying to, I mean, the part of the reason why I wanted to be successful in environmental campaigns is to show it to other people so that they start to feel in a different way, so they don't think anymore that change is not possible, but they start to think, oh, if these people achieved success, then we can do it as well. And I mean, this thing was like the biggest motivation for me ever. Just showing that yes, we are the people. We can actually make a change. It's not. I mean, we don't need government. We don't need big companies. I mean, they have to listen to us, but not vice versa.
Thank you. We would now also open to questions from the audience that is both here. If you want to ask a question, you can raise your arm or you can stand up, either way. And via YouTube, you can ask in the chat. There is already one question I was passed, which is very specific. What methods for mobilizing people worked best in your experience?
Oh, I think it's very different from your world because, I mean, um, well, democracy is kind of like really important thing for effective activism. Well, I mean, somehow, I don't know how, but we're still managing to achieve some success even in authoritarian state, or we can probably already call it a dictatorship state. But actually, when real democracy exists in a society, that really gives to activists a lot of possibilities. I mean, because when different democratic institutions working, I mean, it's useful for activists because they can use different democratic mechanisms and different democratic institutions to actually cause a change. And I mean, in this regard, a very big difference between Western Europe and Germany on one hand and Russia would be that we don't really have democratic institutions, working democratic institutions anymore. I mean, so the space where we can work became so small. I mean, it's not like nothing is possible, but the possibilities are very limited. I mean, sometimes you can achieve success with limited possibilities, but in most of the cases, of course, if democracy really exists in a society, that makes our life much easier and that makes activism much more effective. So, I mean, I think methods of mobilization of people are everywhere more or less the same. I mean, I don't know, you distribute information, you make coalitions, you try to um, go around, speak to people, and involve them in your movement. I don't think there is any difference actually around the world in instruments of mobilization.
Do you have a instrument or a method that you think is especially effective in Russia? Or would you say it's all of these and you have to really cover all the bases?
I would say probably boring thing, but I mean the information is a key. I mean, getting good information to a big number of people can really change a lot. And I mean, I've seen a lot of different initiatives in different countries because I've been working in many countries, not only in Russia, doing joint campaigns. I mean, and I've seen a lot of initiatives that didn't really pay much attention to informing people and educating people about specific problems they wanted to talk about. They felt, I mean, I've seen some people in my life who thought like people supposed to learn everything themselves. People supposed to get information themselves. I mean, if we got information, then why others cannot get this information? And I mean, it's also often happening like when people so much focus, I mean, the activists so much focused on something, they start to see surrounding world like I mean, sometimes they start to see other people like not paying enough attention, not being responsible enough, starting starting to be angry about other people because people are not coming in big numbers and not supporting some kind of environmental initiative, in the activists becoming angry and stuff like that. That happens everywhere. It's not specific for some country, but I mean, I think that's really bad approach. That what you shouldn't never really do. I mean, because I mean the anger, it doesn't lead you anywhere. I mean that makes you ineffective. I mean, I think the only way to go is actually talk to people and be creative in finding ways to get to people and get your information to people and actually convince people to go with you together. I mean, what else?
So if you could just say the question and I'll repeat it into the microphone and then you will answer it. That's okay? Okay, so how did you deal with workers in nuclear and coal power who might have been angry with you trying to, well, disrupt their jobs?
We never had a problem like this when it comes to nuclear, because I mean, the successful campaigns we did, that's been around the transportation of nuclear waste, and we've been basically stopping or disrupting some contracts of a Russian nuclear industry and some foreign nuclear industry about bringing waste to Russia. And I mean, I don't think when we were successful enough to prevent nuclear waste import, I don't think anyone would lose the job because of this. And when it was about construction of nuclear reactors, I mean, in South Africa, I mean, we succeeded to stop the deal before actually the construction been starting, so there was physically actually no people already working on this. And when we've been stopping nuclear reactor near Kaliningrad, well, I mean, it was frozen at some point. I mean, the construction, and it's not under construction until today, and it was built. I mean, at least one reactor was built to quite a high level of completion. Well, it's been nuclear industry who was dealing with, I mean, with the different companies they've been hiring for this construction. And I think, well, I don't think it affected very much workers like working in the construction, because usually when it comes to nuclear, people involved on the construction side, they are not local people. They are not hired at this specific region. It would be like a special, the special working force, the people who dealing with building specifically reactors, and they would be just moving between different nuclear plants if there is a construction. I don't think they lost the job ever. Well, I mean, maybe somebody did lose job because of our campaigns, but I don't know about cases like this. Well, I don't think. Well, when it comes to coal, I don't think so far we succeeded to close down anything that would be leading to people losing jobs. But we have a very different problem there, which is about future jobs. And because the region, the Kuzbas, is so much dependent on coal mining economically, and of course the jobs there, it would in most of the cases there is only coal mining jobs and nothing else. Well, I mean, there are some other jobs, but not that many. I mean, it's mostly coal mining region, and the problem right now, the problem is not with environmentalists who trying to shut down something. The problem is that there are many commitments around the world about phasing out coal, and this region depends on coal very much and depends on the coal export very much. I mean, the half of the coal they produce there, it's coal for export. And I mean, if it goes like the demand for coal will drop because of a coal phase out in many countries, that will likely happen in a decade or even sooner than a decade from now. The main problem of coal mining workers would be that they will not, I mean, a lot of them will not have jobs anymore. And part of the work we're trying to do um, is about putting a pressure on the local government and possibly on the federal government, if we can, uh, to uh, um, well, to create non-coal jobs and start doing it now. Because I mean, when in 2030, let's say Germany stop using coal, as a coalition government said, it's going to be 2030, then the very big amount of coal that mined in Russia will not be going to Europe anymore. That means a lot of jobs will be lost. And I mean, what we want from a government is that they start working right now on the creation of non-coal jobs and the creation of other working places in the region that would not be linked to coal, because otherwise we would have just probably something like 100,000 of people without job in I don't know, 1 or 2 decades, basically. I mean, that shouldn't happen. That would be like really a social catastrophe. And I mean, but well, unfortunately, I don't think our government's doing enough to create the non-coal jobs.
So actually, it's funny. The one question that came from the internet is basically the same as the first, which is there any way we can support activism in Russia and people who are being oppressed there from here, from Germany? And the second question was, wait, actually, you would have to repeat that. I'm sorry. I lost this.
Well, I would say we don't really have many environmental groups working on fossil fuel and climate. I mean, few do some work on this, but it's not like the really big and most important issue for the move for environmental movement right now. And I think it's because the main issue for environmental movement, which became quite small by now because of a governmental repression, is basically survival. I mean, everybody I was talking to who did some kind of protests in the past are sort of pretty much afraid, uh, um, because there will be, well, because if we continue to protest actively in some radical way, then obviously there will be more repressions, and the people become much more concerned with like with it, I mean, how to survive and how to not be closed down and everything. And yeah, I think that's just really hard time for the Russian environmental movement. And I think the best thing to support Russian activists would be to help distribute information about about what's going on in terms of repression in Russia, and because I mean, when you live in a state that is sort of authoritarian or dictatorship state, I mean, where it's, you know, not enough democracy, basically. I mean, part of the policy of dictatorship is to isolate progressive movements and activists, isolate them from a possible public support, make activists feeling like um, that nobody's supporting them, that it doesn't make any sense to continue, and all of that. That's part of a policy of authoritarian and dictatorship states. This is how they kill activism, basically. So the best thing to support activists in this troubled situation is to let them know that you think about them, you distribute information about them, you know, you make more contacts, I don't know, ask media if you know any media to write more about this. Because I think it's not so much when you're like in the real trouble, it's not so much about like money or any technical things, you know. It's more about moral support from others. It's more about like that we need to see that other people on our side. We need to see that people still support us and the people still think. People not only around us but also in other countries as well, everywhere. The people doing stuff like we do. You know, that's very important. I think the moral support is the most important thing when people are in trouble. Yeah.
I think that's a really great call for solidarity. Where, who has the next question? So the question is whether it has become more easy to access information on the health consequences and the people suffering from Chernobyl.
Sometimes yes and sometimes not. That could be very different. Um, um, we had a problem with closed information, that we didn't have access to information when it comes to military production. I mean, like there is a Mayak nuclear reprocessing plant in Russia that was dumping radioactive waste over decades to the rivers, and it's actually very hard to find information about how people living by this river were affected by this radioactive waste, because when they were getting cancer and coming to the hospitals, the doctors in the hospitals being told by the authorities to not write the real, you know, cancer diagnosis in the documents, because in their opinion, you know, that would confirm that they do something nuclear in there, and it was state secret and stuff like this. But about Chernobyl, I would say with Chernobyl, it's relatively okay with information. There was a very good, well, first of all, there are good Russian scientists that been publishing a lot in scientific journals and magazines, a lot of researches, and the Russian academician Alexei Yablokov, a very famous scientist who was studying the effect of Chernobyl on different living beings and the plants and everything, basically, are consequences. He published pretty good book that was about a decade ago. A very good book was published in New York that was summarizing all available information about Chernobyl. I think it should be easy to find this book. It should be on sale. Yeah, so I mean, but no, when information is sensitive to Russian state, like about some military nuclear production from the past, that could still be still secret, not open to others. That's true. I mean.
What So the question is, what impact the Paris Agreement had on Russia?
At first, I wouldn't say it did have any impact. Nothing changed. I mean, although Russian president signed the agreement and was approved in Russia, I mean, it didn't really make any changes in the first years. The real change basically happened this year, and that happened not exactly because of a Paris Agreement. I think the real reason is because European Union wants to introduce CBAM, which we are simply saying the carbon tax, sort of a carbon tax, that will be implemented for goods and the imported goods from those countries who are not really doing anything for climate. And when Russian big business, Russian big business is basically, well, you can say it's part of a government. I mean, they are very close. It's not like in the West where, I mean, of course, corruption exists in many places, we all know, but still, I mean, at least you have here some sort of the business is a bit separated from the politicians, although corruption exists, of course, in this case. But in Russia, it's really together. It's not separated. The big business got afraid of a carbon tax that the EU is going to introduce starting 2025, and I think it was them who basically told Russian politicians, I mean the main people in the country, that they have to do something about this, because otherwise they would have to pay billions and billions in this tax, and I don't know, export to European Union could be just impossible, not possible anymore, and it's a talk about very big money, and the EU is a main trade partner for Russia. So that was taken very serious, and then Russian government or Russian president started to act. It's been a lot of, well, first of all, the climate rhetoric's been changing this year very much. Until this year, Russian president never seriously spoke on climate. He would never say anything like the climate change is the most important thing, we have to do something. But this year, for the first time, he finally started to speak as a normal president of a normal country. And I mean, obviously, there was a lot of efforts around government, and also with participation of different universities and everything. So there was some kind of movement started about developing new, climate policies and what Russia could do and everything. I mean, the good question, why they didn't do this before? I mean, they only started this year to develop something, but well, at least they started. Now the problem is um, that what our government is doing on climate and all these new policies that appears, I would say 90% of this is moving absolutely wrong direction. Like thinking about hydrogen, I mean, Russia wants to make money on hydrogen, for example. I mean, the part of the climate efforts today is about start producing hydrogen, because some people think in the future there will be actually hydrogen instead of gas. So Russian government decided, oh, we will start with hydrogen now, and then we will make more money. I mean, now we're making money on gas. In the future, we will be making money on hydrogen. So Russia really wants to start hydrogen production now, and it's actually a pretty crucial moment because it's all for export, basically for Europe, because the Russian strategy is that they will sell all this hydrogen to Europe. And it's actually a very good moment now for European politicians to actually say that we want green hydrogen, not any kind of hydrogen, but green hydrogen. And if that would happen, then that would really boost the development of renewable energy in Russia. Our share of renewable energy in our energy balance, we have less than 1% of renewable energy. So the thing with hydrogen, if somebody would push Russian authorities to actually for specifically producing only green hydrogen, not with gas, not with nuclear, but with renewable energy, that could actually solve a problem with, you know, non-development of renewable energy in Russia, for example. You know, but of course, I mean, people always want to go easiest way. You know, the easy thing would be, okay, we can make hydrogen with gas, or we can build another nuclear reactor and produce hydrogen. Why would you care how this hydrogen is produced? For example, but there are many different initiatives coming from a government and around surrounding government organizations. A lot of new ideas and a lot of efforts, but unfortunately most of the efforts are like really wrong direction, and we need really to work on, you know, how to change all of it. I don't know.
So two questions again. Sorry. The second question was what Annalena Baerbock as new foreign minister should be pushing for when visiting Russia. And the first question was joining forces with Fridays for Future Russia and how Ecodefence is working with them, how we can cooperate globally?
We had a lot of good cooperation with Russian Fridays for Future, although it's not big, as in Germany. I mean, it's still very good people, very brave people that's still trying to do protests in Russia, even very small protests, but it's very important from my point of view. And I mean, the Russian Fridays for Future been helping us with the to fight nuclear waste import, also doing actions when we've been doing actions. So I mean, I can only say big thank you to our colleagues from Fridays for Future in Russia, because they are very cool after all. And there was recently a very good article in Frankfurter Allgemeine, just I don't know, a couple of days ago, about the guy who used to be Russian Fridays for Future coordinator. I mean, like really brilliant article. I think what you could actually help Russian Fridays for Future is the same like with other activists, distributing information about what they do, about what kind of problem we have in terms of climate work in Russia, and it's also, I think it's also important because, well, I mean, Russia is in the top 4 global polluters. I mean, even if there are a lot of political problems, trying to solve climate change problem cannot really be without Russian participation. I mean, one way or another, Russia should be involved in the climate action, and I think the efforts, a lot of efforts around the world, actually needed to involve Russia. I don't think it's impossible, but unfortunately, we got a government and a president who don't really like to do right thing, and I mean that's in the interest of all of us to push them in any way we can, every way we can, to do actually right thing. And with Annalena Baerbock, I think it's very important that, well, first of all, well, I mean, I was just saying about that international efforts would be needed to push Russia into right direction and actually push for a real climate action. And I think, I mean, the logically continuing this path, it's very important that foreign politicians like Annalena Baerbock, for example, when they go to Russia, they are not only talking about climate change and joint climate action, because I think they will anyway do this and try to find some kind of a common ground to work on climate issues. But it's very important to make it clear that there must be respect for human rights. There must be the position of Germany, EU must be very firm on on the human rights and democracy and stuff like this. And I would really like be looking for more cooperation between Russia and Germany in renewable energy field, because we have almost no renewable energy at all in Russia, and that is actually the best illustration of what is Russian climate action on the governmental side is. I mean, I think there could be a very big cooperation in this field between countries, and I would be happy if Annalena Baerbock actually pushed for this cooperation.
So unless there are any last questions from the audience, I have one last question I saved, and then we would wrap it up. I think we've gone past the standard time, so I would just like to ask you, looking out into the world, looking back on your activism, looking ahead on what you're planning to do in the coming years, what gives you hope? What gives you energy for this future activism you will, I hope, continue on?
Well, the activism always makes me happy and it makes me optimistic. And I mean, right now we're working with. Right now I'm working with a number of our old partners, the German environmental groups, and actually on redeveloping campaign focused on well stopping international funding for Russian coal industry. I mean, in the international cooperation was always giving me a lot of optimism because all of our campaigns, all of the successful campaigns we did for the past 30 years, it's been international campaigns where people from some other countries also participated and we achieved some success together in a group. It was never like one organization or just me personally or any of my colleagues personally. I mean, everything we achieved and everywhere where we succeeded, it was thanks to like a very good coalition to a lot of partners from different countries and actually I mean a lot of German environmental groups that we've been working through the last 20 years. This is why I'm still optimistic. I believe that together, when we work internationally, when we unite as an activist from different countries, and I mean the climate change is a global problem. We have to do stuff together. You know, I mean you cannot really solve a problem of climate change from Germany, and I cannot solve it from Russia. You know, we have to cooperate. And I mean, I have a very positive experience and a long time experience of cooperating with German environmental groups and in other countries as well. And this is what gives me hope, basically. Yeah, the cooperation, the possibility to reach success together. I think it's possible.
I think that's brilliant. Thank you very much. And also thank you to the audience for coming. Thank you to the people who made this possible, who were in the tech team, who prepared this, who booked the room, to Alte Feuerwache for letting us be here. And really, again, thank you to you for coming. There are some things that really stuck with me that to me were really inspiring, and I think it's really cool you've been at this for so long, despite all the challenges. And yeah, thank you for being here.